Welcome, home yogis. I am honored and thrilled to be here today with Michele Lundstrom
Yes,
of Luminous Ignus. Did I say that right?
you did. Good job.
Oh, well, thank you. Michele and I met online somewhere like a month or 6 weeks ago.
Mhm.
And we've been working together off and on since. And I just knew she would have wisdom and beauty to share about practice on our podcast. So, Michele, welcome. I'm thrilled you're here.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me on.
It was a no-brainer, as we've both observed. Our energy blends well, and we're both in the healing arts.
Mhm.
Michele, her bio online is titled "A Unique Approach," which I love because it's true. Um, I have experienced a session with Michele, and it was really transformative on many levels. Michele has been an intuitive healer for over 20 years and has been connected with intuition and guides for as long as she can remember. She is also carrier of lightning medicine since being struck by lightning 5 years ago. One of her current offerings is Heart Brain Coherence and the Intuitive Heart, first presented at the Unity of Des Moines in June of this year. Michele and I are offering an online workshop in October, blending yoga practices that support your intuition and her heart brain coherence practice. I'm really excited about this.
Me too.
Michele provides intuitive readings through your higher self, guides, Akashic records, subtle energy, aka chakras,
Hmm.
to help identify and prioritize what your energy wants to bring to your awareness, as well as energetic imbalances and direct channeled healing energy to the chakras. She also works with energy in one's body intuitively and shamanically, which is a type of medical intuition. Michele offers individual psychic development and coaching for empaths and intuitive medical and mental health professionals. And Michele, you're a mental health professional as well, correct?
Yes, I am. That's how I started. I started out that way.
Yes.
And I've
Michele,
evolved.
what's that? And
And then
evolve.
evolved, yes.
Yes, which is what we all do if we're present.
Yes.
Yes. Michele Lundstrom is an intuitive reader, Akashic Records reader, Galactic Akashic Records reader, shamanic practitioner, certified advanced chakrati
Chakrity.
practitioner,
Mhm. Yeah.
chakrati, Reiki master, empath, coach, teacher, and energy artist. And so that's a corner of one of your pieces behind you, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. I've seen a couple of her pieces in our video together, and they're remarkable. And you can see them online at luminousignus.com, right?
Uh-huh. Yes.
Yes. So we have connected through the healing arts,
Hmm.
and your story starts from birth. You've been connected to spiritual guides and intuition for as long as you can remember.
Yeah.
You became a mental health practitioner. You have also added in these amazing arts and trainings and connections. And
Mhm.
then something big happened 5 years ago.
Yes, it did. I was struck by lightning.
And can you give us a picture? So I would imagine
Mhm.
that some of your gifts did not require practice because you had an event, and it was an inflection event in your life, and there's sort of a before and after. Is that putting too fine an edge on it?
I think anytime someone has, and I'll just name it, a near-death experience,
Mm-hmm.
and I've had 3 of them. Now that was the most recent one. Hopefully, knock on wood, I'm done with those. Um, And when that happens, there are times for people that when you come back, you come back a kinder person. You come back as somebody who's just more in tune and in touch with this spirituality, right? Not necessarily religion, but the spiritual connection, that there is something so much bigger and so much powerful, and that day that the lightning struck me, I was indoors, which is very unusual.
Mhm.
The storm came out of nowhere. It was like a beautiful sunny summer day, and then this giant storm rolls in, and it melted the glass and came through the window and hit me in the right side of my body in three spaces. I know that because it still leaves a mark. Um,
Yeah.
so what happened is it felt like it literally cleared all of the trauma out of my body. And I had had quite a trauma history throughout my own life, which is part of what led me to be a healer in the first place.
Mhm.
So having this experience, and I started to notice that my intuitive abilities were heightened. Not that they
Mhm.
weren't there before, I've been using them and connecting all my life, but everything was heightened. And I was seeing energy in a really different way. And you've kind of experienced me doing this, to just kind of reading that energy in the body, which is, I I'm careful to not advertise myself too much as a medical intuitive, because I think people have a very specific framework around that. And the
Mhm.
way I do it is incredibly kind of shamanic. And shamanic and yogi really go
Yes.
together so well. And there's so much overlap of that, I don't know where one begins and one ends. Um,
Mm.
but being able to be the carrier of this medicine is deeply an honor for me. It is not me that's doing the healing. It is a
Mm.
spiritual energy that I am channeling and bringing through, that seems to kind of know how to clear blocks and chakras, and um, it's just incredible. And then being able to kind of see and feel what's happening in someone else's body. And, my mental health background kind of gives me this wealth of knowledge,
Mm.
um, to kind of understand that conceptually, in a way too, that it all kind of blends together.
Oh, this is really beautiful. So it strikes me that many of us who are in the healing arts have had other trainings, right? We specialized in something in college, or um, we learned things along the way.
Yeah.
And you're right; those conceptual frameworks that we sort of took in from the outside really can, when things start to click, they come together and get illuminated in an entirely different way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you have, okay, I've got to ask about this, because I'm guessing that you and so when you said that the shamanic and the yogi
Hmm.
seem very overlapping, that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense to me.
Hmm.
I'm guessing that there may be a lot of beginning yoga practitioners, or people who are like just beginning to think, you know what? I wonder what would happen if I rolled out my mat and tried to do this at home. I wonder if I need to have a teacher all the time. Who are like, whoa, yoga and shamanism? Same? What do you mean? What do you see as the points of either zipping together or connection?
um, well, in part, just kind of that wisdom of the body, right? And that tapping into that. So to just roll out the mat, just because it's like, oh, my spine needs some wiggles, and it's trusting that. I have hypermobility, so the practices that I do may look really simple compared to the practices other people do, but no less powerful. And
Mm,
so, laying down on the mat and, doing some gentle bridging and doing some cat cow and doing some just pelvic tilts, so
mm,
that my low back can suddenly lay flat. Right, but just listening to that wisdom of the body is yogi and shamanic, right? Because it's really
mm,
getting inward and it's getting in that present moment and it's getting in the heart and it's getting into the breath. And in order to do any kind of shamanic work, you have to be in that
mm,
complete presence of the
mhm,
moment and even dropping out of the mind. Right? When you have a really good yoga flow, you're not thinking. You're
mhm,
just you're just in the body and letting it move how it wants to move, letting it flow how it wants to flow, breathing, doing the pierced lips, right? Really getting that good a- and letting the body move the way it wants to move. And all of that, it just intersects so beautifully.
Oh, that's a beautiful illumination of it's the second tenet of healing yoga. The first tenet of healing yoga is that it's a practice.
Mhm.
And the second one is that interoception or internal sensory experience is key to what makes yoga a healing practice, right?
Mhm.
Because we can practice it as a workout for sure. And you can have a healing yoga practice that feels like a workout. That's appropriate for some people and sometimes.
Mhm.
But what makes it a healing practice is this paying attention to what your body feels and wants.
Mhm. Yeah.
Ah, love it.
Yes.
Um, I'm guessing because you were a healer, an intuitive, and had at least, I'm guessing, some of these modalities in your tool chest
Yes.
before the lightning strike.
Yes.
What role did practice in general play as you were getting all of these impressive credentials as Akashic Records reader? And I, I'm curious what Chakreti is. I have not heard of that one. But
Mhm.
as you were gaining these certifications, what role did practice play in your learning?
Well, yoga was my first exposure to the chakras. So
Mm,
back in 2005 is when I first kind of discovered yoga. And at first, it seemed like a very aerobic, competitive,
mhm,
kind of thing, and I ended up getting injured because of my hypermobility, and so learning how to really do yoga in a different way and
mm,
embrace the chakras and just being able to then being a sensitive being, right, doing breath work on the mat in a class and feeling the chakras, and I was like, whoa, this is real. This is actually real. And there's always that moment. And I love when you get that beautiful experience of getting to witness that in someone else. And
mhm.
it's like, I'll never forget the moment in myself where it's like, that's my root chakra. That's it. It's there. It's real.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So practice is really, it was the beginning of the journey for you because it's where the concepts became
Yes.
present.
The concepts became present and it was so helpful to me. And I'm so energy sensitive that I can feel energy
Mhm,
flowing through my body even as I'm talking to you right now. But being able to feel that and learning how to not control, I don't know that that's the right word, interact with, engage with my
mm,
energetic body and really learning my own has helped me then yes, down the road, as I study different things, learn how to help people with theirs. And being very in tune with my body,
Mhm.
because a lot of times I'm reading other people's body by bringing that energy into my own. I feel it in a sensory, and we call it clairsentience, clear sense,
Mhm.
which is sensation in the body. And so when I experience that, I know so well what's mine and what's not mine, because I'm so practiced at, this is my energy. This is how my heart chakra feels today. This is how my knees are feeling today. And when I know that, and that's part of my morning mat practice, is I'm sensing my body so I know where it is, so that when I'm working with others throughout the day, I'm very clear, this is
Mhm.
mine. And oh, I'm sensing this. This is not mine.
Ah, that's that you put that so succinctly and so well. I've only really ever talked about that experience with some of my apprentices in the past.
Mhm.
One of the things after, we've gone through anatomy and sort of the gross aspects, I have them, I have one of them do a pose wrong. There
Mhm.
is no wrong, but like cattywampus some
Mhm.
way and not tell us. And then another one has to come in and not only feel like what's the cattywampus,
Mhm.
but then how can you use your words
Mhm.
to to help that find balance and happiness,
Mhm.
not to match a template, but to find some balance. And then B, how can you use touch with permission,
Mhm.
not to position the limb, but to have them activate muscles, right? And where we always get to is as you approach the client, you notice what you're feeling in your body.
Yeah.
And that's part of how you know
Mhm.
where the cattywampus, because sometimes the knee might be in, but it's not about the knee, right?
Yeah.
It's about the neck
Mhm.
or the foot or whatever. Could be the belly button. Who knows?
Right.
And you put that in a much more conceptual way so beautifully. And I also that's one of the first um, responsibilities of teaching is your own practice
Yeah.
for exactly the reason that you delineated.
Mhm.
Wow. So you experienced the chakras before really learning about them very much.
Yeah, I mean, I I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yes.
Right? So, having that experience and having yoga introduce me to energy, which was something I always felt, I didn't actually know that other people didn't feel it to the degree that I do. I just thought, I guess we're not supposed to talk about it. Well, now I'm an adult and I'm going to talk about it. But yes, like being able to have that introduction has really helped me on my journey. So yoga always has this very special place in my heart of kind of helping me connect into presence, helping me to learn about energy and the body. And um yeah, I'm deeply grateful to everything yoga that I have learned.
That's an interesting way to put it. One of the things in some traditions that you do before and after a practice is you express gratitude for the tradition,
Mhm.
um, because this does go back so long.
Yeah.
And I always imagine that yoga started as people who were talking like millennia ago, right? And maybe they didn't fit in society, or maybe they were taking a time out and they were off by themselves and they were like, huh, that's weird. What happens when I do that? and they had time on their hands.
Yeah.
And Warrior One was born. Now, I mean, historically, we know that the names are primarily a 20th century or close to that
Yeah.
uh, convergence. But there's a tradition there that goes back to home yoga practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything starts somewhere, right?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, and yeah, it's beautiful. And wouldn't it be fun to like travel back in time and get to meet them and speak with them and think about like what was going on that they decided that and then felt, they must have felt, right? They must have felt the energy that they would have had to have, because as you put different poses and flows, even mudras together, there's such an awareness of energetic flow and then bringing in the breath. And yeah, it's beautiful.
And then there was probably a natural systematizer among them going, oh, okay, well, we're going to call this one
Yes.
Chin Mudra.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, yeah, I love that you brought in hand mudras
Mhm.
because, as you know, there are hand mudras and then full body mudras.
Mhm.
But it's so lovely with people who wouldn't necessarily say they feel energy,
Mhm.
to have people just do the simple hand exercise
Yeah.
and then have them get quiet, breathe, and connect fingers and just notice what changes
Yeah.
in your sensory experience.
Yeah.
Just notice. And if it's nothing, that's fine.
For sure. And if you're just
Um,
rolling out your own mat, that's a great thing to do, right? To warm up the palm chakras, to get them going, and even like feel that heat on your face. Like if your jaw's
mhm,
tight and just putting that there, right?
yeah,
And just getting that energy flow and doing that through the
mhm.
hands is brilliant, right? And even just kind of moving that through your body. I feel like I've got so much energy moving now. And if that's all you do, you've still done a practice.
Oh, thank you for that. Yes.
Mhm.
I think that this is one of the obstacles that people experience when they come into a home yoga practice workshop. They'll sometimes say, well, like, what do I do? Like, how do I start?
Mhm.
And there's a whole section where we kind of talk about that. But the whole idea, I always quote Winston Churchill, who said, and I never get the quote I perfectly right, but something like plans are essential. No, planning is essential and plans are worthless,
Yeah.
right? It's that like, okay, so we're going to spend this amount of time thinking about how does it fit into my life? And I'm going to notice when I'm in classes, oh, that pose is really interesting to me. My body wants more of that. Or, ooh, my body has something to say and I'm not sure I like it in that one. I may have to come back to that when I'm alone. Right. And like kind of collecting these pieces so that when you roll out your mat,
Mhm.
there there's things that bubble up. You've established a conversation with your body
Mhm.
and you roll out the mat and it's kind of like calling up your best friend who you haven't talked to in 2 years. And then just somehow magic happens because that's what you guys do, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully it's way more frequently than every 2 years with your body.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. But there is that sense of a conversation that
Mhm.
our bodies are intelligent,
They're
right?
intelligent and it's so important to be in them.
Mm.
So a lot of times I get so many people that come to me and what I'll see is I call it the brain on a stick because it's like their energy body is like here up and they're not in their body. Now, when I meet people that have a regular practice, even if it's a very simple home mat practice, it's like they're going into their body. And, having been in mental health and working, my specialty was trauma.
Mm.
And so I would see people just out of their body. And what I found was yoga was a great way to go into the body and not have all of the trauma reject going back into the body. So it was like a bypass the trauma and get someone back into their body. So that is it's huge. Just that practice of learning, if people have had a lot of trauma, they can do really simple yogic practices that help them learn to practice just moments, even if it's just you're in your body while you're on your mat, and
Yeah.
just like letting that be sinking into all of the chakras, and even feeling your legs when you breathe and your feet when you breathe, and really getting in there. Because a lot of Americans walk around as a brain on a stick.
I cannot remember at the moment the name of this movie. It came out in the 90s sometime, I think, or maybe it was the 80s. But there was a character in it named Baron von Munchausen. And he had one of those Elizabethan collars, and
Uh-huh.
his head would just sometimes go pew, and he'd like go all over the world, and he was just a head on like a little satellite that was his Elizabethan collar, and then he'd occasionally come back.
Yeah, kind
But
of
it
like
was the
that. Yeah.
avatar of this. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So yoga is, and I love that this was sort of your introduction. Yoga is defined, right, by the 8 limbs, and the eighth limb is samadhi, and people often translate that as enlightenment, right? And I was always like, oh well, that's never going to be me, so I'll just focus down here, right? and and I also, I'm not sure I want the kind of enlightenment that separates us from the world,
Mhm.
because I'm just having such a good time.
For
Yeah.
sure.
The Buddhists say that you're very lucky to be in a human body, right?
Yeah.
And I feel that deeply. Um, but the other 8 limbs, or the other 7 limbs, when they all come together, they actually just result. Samadhi isn't, this is not just my interpretation, but enlightenment isn't a state we enter, but it's flow. It's exactly what you're talking about.
Mhm.
The moment when there's not a difference between the subject and the object.
Mhm.
We just are.
Yeah.
So, did you use yoga in your sessions at this point in your career?
I did. So I found it in 2005. In 2007, I actually started a huge integrative mental health program for military veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And so it was actually, that model is actually still being used um, today. But back then, and I'm sure you have a conceptualization of this, people thought I was absolutely nuts. There's this therapist out on the fringe, and she's like having these veteran guys do yoga. So yeah, I did. And now we know, and now that's more mainstream, and now that's more accepted, but back in 2007 that was unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to weave that into all kinds of things in my own
Mm-hmm.
mental health practice, and then creating programs for other people to do for healing, because healing is a whole mind, body, spirit experience. Yeah.
The experiences, and my take, I think of physical as spirit, and spirit is physical.
Mhm.
There's just no separation. But there we have these different experiences that are like facets and ways in.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that that 2005 start of yoga practice
Mhm.
was one of the places where you got a toolbox.
Oh, it's a wonderful toolbox. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How you mentioned my morning mapping. Is that part of the heart brain coherence, or is that a separate thing?
Um, I combine them because I mean, all of this, again, it weaves together. I'm a
Yeah.
weaver. Um, to lay on the mat, and I say I've done yoga every day since I started because every day I at least do shavasana. And when I go into shavasana, I also do a lot of combining the heart brain coherence. So if I have nothing to give my mat that day, I will um put my hands on my heart because that's what helps us begin to cue the heart in. Like,
Mhm.
hey, heart, I want you to be in charge. And we actually have neurotransmitters in our heart,
Mhm.
just as we do our brain. And our heart has an electromagnetic field. And this process that, we're going to guide people through when we have our class and
Mhm.
um, being able to get the heart, the brain, and the central nervous system to all come into sync, to all come into coherence, with the heart being in charge. And
Mhm.
so that's a big part of that. And that helps me to be very present. There's
Mhm.
a gratitude practice within heart brain coherence that's
Mhm.
really important. Um, because if we try and connect in with the energy of love,
Mhm.
love can be loaded for people, so loaded. Gratitude is a form of love, and
Mhm.
it's a form of love that most of us can connect in with and feel comfortable with. And
Mhm.
so when we connect in with gratitude, and let's just do a really mini practice of just putting our hands on our hearts. And then we're going to begin to inhale through the nose, and we're going to exhale through the mouth with a slightly longer exhale. And that slightly longer exhale as we enter the heart tells the central nervous system from the heart, in this moment, I'm okay. So don't do this if you're driving. Just slowing that breath, that longer exhale. And then just feel gratitude for something. It can be something small. I'm grateful for this toy poodle that's sitting on my lap just off the screen. And then begin to expand that energy. And one more breath. And you can drop your hands down from your heart. Wiggle it out if you need to. But see, even just that short little bit,
Mhm.
right? The nervous system starts to calm. The brain's now beginning to take some cues,
Mhm.
right? Depending on how fast you sync up. For some people, you'll need a longer practice with some motion. Um, but being able to do that makes everything calmer. And the nervous system in our world is like on fire if we're kind of trying to take everything in. And the monkey mind likes to tell us all kinds of things. And so when we can sink down into that heart brain, the heart
Mhm.
only tells the truth. And the heart doesn't work with cognitive thought like the brain. The heart speaks in very simple ways. And I also teach a practice of how anyone,
Mhm.
even if they've never considered themselves intuitive, can, through this practice, find their own intuitive answers through the
Mhm.
heart once really getting in that space.
Mm. That is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Yes. I really want to return to it. You have emphasized the simplicity
Mhm.
of the practices that you focus on,
Yes.
and the the sort of bare bones practice of shavasana, or at least that's how we in the West see it.
That's a very, yes. In the West, it's seen that way. Not so much if we were to go to India. I don't think they would see it that way.
I was very fortunate to have a teacher fairly early on, um, and early on, I mean more sort of in my uh, professional career, But I was able to take a series of workshops with Richard Freeman, who is a fairly well-known yogi, especially for us older folks. I don't think he teaches at all or very much anymore, but he was the first person who said, when I was taught, we started and ended with Shavasana, and Shavasana was considered an entire practice in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do more than Shavasana.
Yes.
The reason we do the other things is to tame your monkey mind and work out the kinks you put in your body. Mm-hmm. Right? And that was this kind of window opening for me.
Yeah.
That was like, oh. And what I've noticed as I age, I still do headstands and handstands and arm balances occasionally, but my baseline practice are the simple beginner poses, right? Cat cow is indispensable.
Absolutely. One of my favorites.
Right? The pelvis is in and of itself just an amazing work of art. And it's the opportunity for so much sensation, and to just take it and rock it.
Yeah.
And then rock with it the muscles, the psoas that runs through it like ribbons and connects it up to the diaphragm. I mean, it's that in and of itself could be a whole practice one day.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love your approach to practice, and I love your way of guiding people into their heart space, basically.
So important in yoga.
I like to think that it sort of arises. It's like that path, right? The 8 limbs start with kind of stop doing these things. They're not super good for us. And you might consider these things. They're kind of helpful.
Yeah.
And then move your body, and then pay attention to your breath. Gather in your senses, because the outside world wants them a lot. And that's not necessarily what they're for. And then from that arises focus and concentration. And then from all of that, sort of like grace, samadhi arises, right? And nowhere does it say you should be able to balance on your hands.
I mean, it's cool and it's fun, but also, right? Like, and if that's fun for you, and if that feels good, that's incredible. Do it. If a more simple, more somatic, more gentle approach feels fun for you, then do that.
Well, and I also, it's not like you should never do a headstand or a handstand or something without preparation.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And that in terms of a practice, right? I've gone spontaneously into handstands because I was having fun and messing around, right? It's also kind of a good way to get hurt, just FYI, folks.
Yep.
Not every time, but it's happened. That's later in a practice, right? So for a daily practice, many of us, to have half an hour or an hour or 90 minutes for a practice is a luxury, right? So if you've got 15 minutes for practice, well, the simple stuff is what you have, and that's good, because those are the most powerful practices, period. Yeah.
And using it to prepare the body for other things too. I mean, you bring up a great point about injuries. I used to do trapeze, of all things.
Oh, cool.
And I would always do a 20-minute yoga flow to prepare my body before I did any trapeze. So, I mean, there's anything you do athletically, like doing a yoga flow can really help prevent injury by getting right. And same thing with spiritual practices, right? Doing that yoga can be a nice warm up for going into spiritual practices as well.
Yeah. Yes. I would imagine that practice was part of learning, and it was
Mhm,
probably more like an educational practice at some point,
mhm.
but they layer. Am I right?
Yeah, at all layers. Yeah, yeah.
What if you have ever had trouble getting on the mat?
Mhm.
What is one thing you could share with a new person who is maybe their thing is meditation, it's not physical yoga practice, or maybe they're practicing
Yeah.
some of these other healing arts? How do you wind your way back to the mat or the cushion?
Yeah, sometimes I get because I'm also very much a businesswoman too,
Mm-hmm.
and I can get really caught up in this, I call it the go mode, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like, I'm being boss woman and I'm not gonna stop and do my yoga practice. Oh, well, yeah, I am. Right. But I have to really be intentional in those moments and remind myself these are the moments I need it the most.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be way more productive if I stop and do this 20 minutes of whatever practice resonates with my body that day. I'm going to get so much more done after that. I'm going to be so much more focused. I'm going to be calm. I'm going to be sharper. I know all of these things. And so it's almost like a part of me becomes this inner coach that is like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, remember, like all those excuses.
Mm-hmm.
No, they're not true, right? Because the monkey mind will begin to make the excuse, well, I don't have time.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so busy. I've got to get this done and I've got to answer these emails and I've got to pick up the kids and I've got to, well,
I'll do
that,
that at 4,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. It's like that's later. This is, it's now 1 o'clock, so I'm going to do this. This is my time for this. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of that self-talk where you become that really self-compassionate yogi that is reminding yourself of why this is the most supportive thing you can actually do right now for all the excuses that the monkey mind wants to give you.
Yes. Yeah, it's that sort of addition mindset, right? Yes, and yes,
Yes,
monkey mind. I do have that to-do list. You
yes,
are right. And
yes.
so I'm going to close the monkey mind's computer. A- And I find that it's helpful to me, and perhaps you're more disciplined about this than I am, but it's helpful to me to remember that it doesn't have to be 20 minutes.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes there are days, there's a flight, goodness knows,
Mhm.
or someone comes knocking at the door and you're like, oh, I didn't plan for that. You have 3 breaths, you have 5 breaths,
Mhm.
and something magical sometimes occurs in the course of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of call that my internal compromise, right? Where
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
I'll tell the monkey mind, all right, just give me 3 minutes. We'll just do 3 minutes. And usually I end up doing more. And there are days where it's like, nope, I'm done. Like, that's it. So, I mean, those internal compromises are part of living a happy whole life because ultimately, if we live this rigidity of like, I have to do 20 minutes at this time and I've got to get up with the sun and I've got to figure out when sunrise is and like if it gets so rigid, it's no longer flowing and it's starting to turn into something that isn't necessarily to me yoga anymore. And so
Absolutely.
really being able to do those internal compromises and um really kind of be in the flow, but that's listening to the body too. If I'm too tired to get up, okay, fine. Like, can you roll on the floor and
Yeah.
do
Can you
some
just,
breaths?
yeah, bend your knees, put your feet on the bed, drop your knees side to side.
Right. Yes.
And as long as you're noticing,
Mhm.
as long as you're feeling,
Yeah.
it's the sensory experience
Mhm.
that it all comes back to.
Yes.
Well, my sensory experience right now is one of incredible heart-filledness and gratitude. I hope that you will come back sometime. Thank you for the taste of the heart brain coherence
Yeah.
practice and a window into a professional healer's life and how practice and healing zip together.
Yes. Oh, and thank you so much for having me here. It's been an honor. And I'd love to come
Likewise.
back.
Thank you. We will do this. And we will soon be putting out into social media um, within the next month information about our workshop in October, Heart Brain Coherence and Intuition Supporting Yoga. I'm looking forward to doing that with you and to welcoming everybody into that practice.
Yes,
Thank
it's
you
going
so
to
much.
be so fun and so enlightening.
Yes, enlightening. We'll be
Enlightening.
in the flow.
Yes.
Thank you so very much. And happy Yoga Day.
Happy Yoga Day.